Hey, this video is from my live stream discussion with a sort of hardcore vegan, anti-meat consumption, anti-animal exploitation activist, minor activist, Lauren. I just wanted to say that this was a discussion and not a debate. I was trying to ask questions and question myself really with my conversation with Lauren. But in the end, I gained a deeper understanding of not only where I stand, but also where she is coming from, and perhaps where a lot of vegans are coming from. We invited some viewers on to chat with us as well, so I hope you enjoy this discussion, and check out more from live streams on my main channel, which I occasionally do. Welcome everybody in the stream real quick. This is Lauren. And Lauren, would you call yourself, you're a vegan, right? But would you call yourself a militant vegan? A hardcore vegan?
I'm an abolitionist. So you can interpret that as militant or non-militant. I'm not for violence or like anything like that.
What do you want to abolish? The meat industry?
All forms of animal exploitation. So for entertainment, clothing, food, any ways that we use and abuse animals.
Okay. All right. So Lauren, the animal abuse abolitionist, and I'll attempt to kind of take counter positions to what you're saying, but deep down, like what I really believe, I'm not some sort of hardcore opposing figure. You know, I'm open-minded to that, so I'm not coming at this with any sort of hostility, but I think you'll probably understand that. And then I might read some stuff from chat if I'm having a hard time coming up with counter arguments and stuff, and then I'll pose that to you. And then maybe if you're interested, we could have, at the end of this sort of discussion, we could even bring people on to ask questions or something as well. But we'll get there when we can, or we'll get there when we get there. So, Lauren, why don't you lay out for me your sort of position in terms of how you got to this belief that you want to be an abolitionist, and why?
Well, I mean, like basically it started out when I was like a really small child and I watched the film like Babe and Charlotte's Web. I sort of had like alarm bells going off as like a young kid, like, okay, I don't know if I agree with the way that we use animals. And then I became a vegetarian about 6 years ago, I'd say, with like a great resistance from my family. Like they tried to feed me chicken soup and just do loads of shit to trick me. And then I sort of always wanted to become vegan, but I was kind of told by my family and society around me, like, oh, veganism is this extreme thing. It's this this weird thing that only extreme, weird, militant people do. So I was like, okay, I'll just be a vegetarian for a little while. And then I just came across some like animal rights material in philosophy. So like Peter Singer, Tom Reagan, Gary Francione. I suppose Gary Yourofsky is more of an activist, but he sort of talks about this stuff philosophically. But yeah, it's sort of like a long journey of getting here.
And how do you plan to reach this sort of goal? Do you plan to do it through activism and all that? What is the end goal exactly? Sorry, actually, first of all. You kind of said it earlier, but no exploitation of animals.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's like an ideal, and like every movement is like progressing towards an ideal. Like it might not be, possible to fulfill it completely. But basically, like the way of getting there would be to talk to as many people as possible about it. So you get more people on your side, then you have people voting with their dollar. They're not purchasing animal products, they're buying vegan alternatives, they're making a vote in that demand. And then once you have enough people who sort of adopt this lifestyle and adopt this philosophy, you can affect legislation, take subsidies away from dairy and beef production, put into crop production, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's basically just talk to as many people as humanly possible. and see if you can change their mind.
Okay. Now, why do you draw the line at animals? In other words, why do you think you think it's wrong for animals to be exploited? What if can't I make the case that it's also wrong for any form of life, including plant life, to be exploited?
So, to me, and what is actually the basis for probably most people's morality, sentience is the key component. There is research into sort of plant cognition, but it's not a very well developed field, and it's got a lot of criticism. For example, like there are animals that are suspected not to be conscious. So you have your sponges, coral, bivalves, some mollusks. They, like some species, have like a little bit of nerve ganglia, so they have some sort of nervous tissue. But it's widely believed that they're not having any kind of inner life. They don't experience sort of emotions, suffering, that sort of thing. So, it doesn't matter how I treat an object or a thing or something that doesn't have a capacity to experience life. It does matter how I treat somebody who has feelings, who can experience well-being, and who can experience suffering.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to hammer down on this point a little bit then, because I mean, you're saying the research is kind of not totally conclusive and it's controversial, but okay, what if I can prove to you, or what if we can find out as sort of through science that certain forms of fungal life and plant life are, maybe they're not expressing their consciousness, but they have, I mean, they have done this with fungal stuff. There's these sort of neural networks of these very complicated connections underground that they form that is even more complicated than humans can come up with in some cases. And so what if their consciousness is just expressed a different way? In other words, what makes you necessarily value the type of sentience which animals express over the type of sentience that plants express?
Yeah, so my view would be basically that wherever you draw the moral line, you should draw it in pencil. So like as new evidence becomes available or comes to light, you can sort of alter your choices based on that. The other thing I would say is if you are very deeply concerned about plant lives and plant suffering, say, you would still want to be vegan because the amount of crops that are grown simply just to feed animals vastly outnumbers the amount of crops that are used to feed people. So if you want to live your life with hurting the least amount of plants, the least amount of animals, that's the way to go. Even if there is sort of evidence for plants having some analogous features of consciousness, I would argue it's very, very unlikely, especially with sort of evolution in mind. For example, plants can't move. So for them to experience pain would not be advantageous in an evolutionary sense, because a plant can't recoil. If you hit a plant, it's not going to move away. Obviously, you have Venus flytraps and things like that. The complexity required to generate consciousness seems to be a lot, and not photosynthesis, while a beautiful process, is not very energy efficient and wouldn't really lend itself well to consciousness. All that in light, and the fact that you would still be helping plants if you went vegan. That's how I feel about the whole plants argument.
Okay. Now, so humans, according to evolution and science, we've evolved over the course of millions of years, and certainly it seems like our bodies have adapted favorably to meat consumption. And maybe there's some debate about this, but it seems like meat is just the most efficient source of a lot of things. Obviously, for one example that I know about is that you can get the right amount of protein and the right amino acid profile in order to absorb that protein when you have enough variety of plants, but it's like any piece of red meat or something, I think just has all of that by default. So it's a very convenient form. And if you just think about it logically, like you said, animals eat plants, and we're eating animals. So it's like a more efficient form of that. So what do you say to the point that, we've evolved this way, it's the most efficient form of fuel, it seems to help, it seems to have helped our brains evolve even, some people theorize, and all this, I guess what I'm saying is, do you have a distinction between the industry and the way we are packaging and making animals products, or do you think, like, if there's a bow hunter or somebody who's just kind of eating animals in a more direct, sustainable, respectful way, let's say, maybe raising their own and stuff, is that a problem with you or no?
So I would come at it from a rights-based perspective. So the act of killing itself is wrong. It doesn't matter if the animal was wild and you shot it one shot and it died right away. It doesn't matter if it was raised on a farm and you gave it the best possible life that you did and you shot it to eat it. The act of killing itself is wrong. In the same way that, so if you were to meet a girl, treat her real well, all nice, you like her back to your house, so you have a nice conversation, you're perfectly pleasant to her. You slip her a date rape drug, and she passes out, you rape her. She has no knowledge of the event, she has no memory of it. She won't suffer from that, basically. I mean, in this hypothetical, there are real life consequences to that. But the act of rape is wrong. So that's really where it comes down to.
Okay, so oh, hello everyone. We won the debate, guys. We won the debate. Oh, what happened? Hello?
I have no idea.
What happened? Hold on. Oh, okay. Are we back?
Can you hear me and see me?
I don't see you. I hear you. Oh, there you go.
Oh.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So, all right. I wanna tackle that line of reasoning for a second. So, I don't see animals as equivalent to people. You seem to.
I don't.
You don't. But you just
No.
equivocated. Well, I know you're saying it as an analogy, but like, don't you think? Okay, so life requires life to sustain itself. Do you acknowledge that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there seems to be a cycle of life needing other life to sustain itself. Except for plants, though. Well, no, plants do need other life. They need water. They need water is kind of like the basis. Soil. They need something in the soil. They need some form of basic life, I guess. But anyways, so with that in mind, can't you say that, I'm kind of thinking about it like this. Animals are maybe they have some form of sentience, they do, but it's clearly a designation below humans. And so therefore, it's justifiable for us to consume animals as a form of life, a more efficient form of life than plants, in order to sustain our own life. Just like animals consume plants to sustain their life, they consume plants, fungus, fruits, whatever, to sustain their life, bugs. So it's just a chain. It's just an animal kingdom, and we're at the top of that animal kingdom. Somebody has to be at the top. What about that kind of? Does that make sense?
Well, that's basically kind of a might makes right argument. So we're at the top of the food chain, we're the most powerful, we're the most complex, therefore we have the right to do whatever we want to those who exist below us. And I don't agree with that line of reasoning whatsoever.
Well, it's not necessarily a might makes right argument, because I'm saying it's with the goal of sustaining life. It's not, if we came across an alien planet, let's say, that there's a lower form of life, and we have the means to sustain ourselves efficiently. In other words, what I'm saying is, it's not, the justification is that it's to sustain our lives.
Well, my response to that would be that it's not necessary. This has been backed up by numerous nutrition and dietetic groups. And the idea that meat is in some way sort of healthier or more beneficial to human health is not correct in any way. So because it's not necessary, like, for example, if I needed to kill an animal or another person to preserve my own existence, I would be okay with doing that. The problem comes when it is unnecessary, which living in 2020 in a developed country is absolutely the case.
Okay.
Like, most people are not living in tribes, they're not living in remote areas of the world where there's limited access to food, extreme temperatures, etc. It's completely unnecessary, and that's where the immorality comes into it.
So, do you think that, if we're to take your line of reasoning, then can't you say that almost everything, cities, cars, anything that serves humans, seems to intrude upon nature and the habitats of animals? So, in other words, how far, if we're really to believe your line of reasoning, I mean, wouldn't you say that cars, cities, buildings, development, this is all exploiting animals and their habitats, that they were there first, these kinds of things?
So basically, the sort of original definition for veganism is to avoid the use of animals as far as practicable and possible. Now, for many people, cars, cities, technology, things that do encroach on nature are necessary in order to make money, to eat, to survive, to pay your rent. So veganism is not concerned with ending all suffering. Some people might take a utilitarian perspective and say it's about minimizing suffering. I disagree with that. But it's about granting rights, animals.
Granting rights to animals.
One right specifically.
Okay, let me think of some sort of counter arguments here. So I think, I don't know. You seem to value sentience, but what is that really? Because I think I value consciousness, and it's not clear to me that animals. I think certain animals exhibit traits of consciousness, and so in that sense, I am against eating dog or dolphins or whatever, these kinds of intelligent forms of life. But like, a cow, for example, a cow is not. I think there's a difference, like you kind of are putting all animals in this same group, which is of sentience, and it's like, okay, hold on. If you're drawing the line at plants are over here, which, fine, and you're saying all animals are over here. I'm saying, well, hold on, maybe not all animals are over here. Maybe just some animals are here in terms of what is not acceptable to eat, okay? And then there's humans. So what do you say to that point? Like, it seems like you're clumping all animals together when they're certainly not all on the same level of intelligence or sentience, even consciousness.
Oh, I totally agree. There are degrees to sentience in the same way that there are degrees to sentience in human beings. So you can have people with sort of mental handicaps or physical handicaps, or people in a coma, for example. They're not experiencing consciousness or sentience in a way that normal, healthy people are experiencing it, if at all. So simply because another being has a lesser degree of sentience or a lesser degree of consciousness doesn't give you the right to rob them of that sentience or consciousness.
Okay. I mean, but again, the same point can be made with plants. And I know you're saying, well, helping plants would mean being vegan would ultimately help plants because there's less plants being cultivated for animals to eat. But the same, whether that's true or not, the same point is that you're still robbing whether you consider it sentience or not, you're still robbing life You're taking life from these plants, and in some cases, very complex forms of life, with fungus especially, and you're taking it for yourself. So, how is that different from the argument you're making with animals?
Well, number one,
Keeping
I
in
would
mind that animals might be further along the sentient scale, but again, not all animals are equally sentient. Just like, yeah, sorry.
So firstly, I would draw back to your own point, actually, that you need life to sustain life, and that fits within the definition of veganism, which is to abstain from cruelty as far as practicable and possible. And secondly, like, a plant does not suffer when you show it. Like, for example, if you were to take an oak tree and like burn down the sapling of that oak tree, that's the child of that oak tree, it's not going to feel pain or loss or grief. In fact, like trees specifically have functions to help get their seeds away from them so that they don't rob them of light and nutrients and stuff like that. Um, so like if we were to, so what I want to do is extend one right to animals, which is the right not to be used as property. Now, if we were to extend that right to plants, it really wouldn't do anything for plants. Don't experience suffering, loss, enslavement. They don't have the complexity, the neurons, the machinery to generate consciousness or sentience in any way that's really analogous to us. Like you can find conditioning in plants, you can find response to stimuli, but you require like a complex animal brain to like feel emotions. Like, and we've even identified these parts of the brain, right? So the amygdala for fight or flight, and the like frontal cortex for reasoning, and these sorts of things.
But again, like so,
Subjects are
for the lower forms of animal life, let's say the least complex ones, like you were mentioning mollusks and clams, I guess, mussels, these kinds of things. And I guess this is why some people are pescatarian as well, is because they, I guess, fish or something that they think are, I don't know all the reasons, but part of it might be due to sustainability or whatever. But what about that? Like, what if I say mollusks don't feel pain, or they don't grieve, or they don't care? So what if you can just be a vegan plus eating mussels?
there are those vegans who exist out there. For me personally, I would give them the benefit of the doubt. Um, so they do have sort of rudimentary sort of ganglia, which are parts of neurons. Um, they may well not be conscious or sentient, but I would still rather give them the benefit of the doubt. I have no reason to include them in my diet. I'm perfectly healthy and happy and fit eating the food that I eat. I don't see why I would go out of my way to eat shellfish because it's technically sort of vegan. They're not sentient. They're not feeling anything. I'd prefer to sort of like err on the side of caution.
Okay. Um, okay. Well, I'm trying to think of. I mean, it just seems like you have this hardline thing when it comes to animals, and I'm saying it doesn't seem so hardlined because those things are considered animals, yet they don't grieve or whatever, and you're erring on the side of caution because you don't need them, because you could just eat plants, which to you plants are very like safe bet because none of the plants at all seem to exhibit these things. I guess I could get into a philosophical point of like, well, maybe to you they don't exhibit those things, but maybe in their own way that we don't understand they exhibit those things, and so at any point you're still robbing life of its own life and all this. But I guess you're viewing it, so it seems like you're viewing it through a human lens of what is and isn't suffering.
Well, no, like why not take the least amount of life? Like living requires violence, requires himsa. Um, not going to be able to go through life without causing any suffering. Why wouldn't you want to go through life causing the minimum amount of suffering that you
Okay, I could see that point. See, I'm not again. I'm not a hardcore person against what you're saying, and I haven't even explored this line of thought. Like some people are criticizing me in chat, like I'm not providing good counter arguments. I welcome people to provide some counter arguments. Um, I mean, my thing is like the way I kind of view it. To be honest with you, is I don't soy products and bugs and all this shit. Like I don't want to drink. I will not stay in my pod and eat bugs. You know what I mean? Like I don't want a future where all of the nutrients and value and goodness of food, plant or not, plant based or not, is being processed into like these fucking just the most inexpensive, cheaply grown, uh, nutrient lacking things, which I feel like is the I feel like what meat does. Okay, or the industry we have now with meat is that as cheaply processed as it might be, as animal farmed as it might be, in order to make meat, there's a certain quality standard of nutrients that have to be met in order for it to even work. Like in other words, you can't feed, you can't make cows in a lab. You know what I mean?
well, that's like actually possible. Like you can make cow tissue in a lab. It has been done, and it probably will continue to get cheaper and more available in the future.
Okay, well that's a question actually for you then.
I'm not quite seeing your point.
So that's a good question for you actually. Okay, so if we could make lab created meat in which the animal was not raised on a farm and there was no plants to sustain it, would you be against that?
For me personally, I don't particularly care for meat. Um, I like fruits and vegetables. I like the food that I eat. I don't think there's like I don't know a lot about how the process happens. I don't think there's anything wrong with like taking a cell culture and reproducing that into tissue because obviously unless an animal has been harmed in that process, it wouldn't be an issue for me. Um, I suppose it would come down to how they extract the like original cell material to grow whatever it is they want to grow.
That might be the point of compromise because I assuming assuming that it has assuming it like it's clean and it's healthy or whatever, you know, it's not super tampered with. I think I would be okay with that. I think probably most meat eaters would be okay with that. And it sounds like you could be okay with that depending on the process. Like here's a question. What do you think about eggs? Like chicken eggs in terms of eating those?
Like in terms of health or ethics or
Ethically. All of this is ethical.
well, so all chickens, even backyard chickens, they have to come from a breeder. And for that breeder to be profitable, what they have to do is take all of the male chicks that are produced and either throw them into a meat grinder at 1 day old or suffocate them in a plastic bag. I'm sure there are other ways to sort of like mass murder these 1 day old chicks, but there's absolutely nothing ethical about doing that. So any way of obtaining eggs starts with this cruelty, and I don't think people should support an industry that like indiscriminately murders day old chicks.
Okay. What if you take a breeder out of the equation, but the actual process of laying an egg is not harming anyone? It's just, you know, a cycle or whatever that the hen has, right? Or whatever it is, the chicken.
Um, yeah, see, kind of the problem with that is that modern hens, as they are themselves, are a horrific example of what happens with human exploitation of animals. Egg-laying hens lay like a couple of hundred, like 100, 200 eggs a year more if they're on like big factory farms where they're specifically bred for egg laying. In the wild, like their ancestral counterpart lay about 14 eggs a year. It causes extreme stress upon the animal to have all of these nutrients going into making eggs. And a lot of the time, chickens in the wild would eat their unfertilized eggs, absorb those nutrients back in. So really, even if there was like no breeder, there was no massacring of day-old male chicks, it's not your egg. You don't need to eat it. You certainly don't need to have that animal in existence that suffers by its like very nature of being. So even like, for example, I'm against breeding pets. I think it's morally wrong.
Okay. Okay, interesting. You're against owning pets too?
No, I would kind of be so like adopting animals is great. There are loads of animals in shelters and they need homes. And I believe that like because of the mass amount of puppies and kittens and things that we breed into the world, we should have a responsibility to look after those animals who are already with us. Um, totally in favor of like adopting an animal, looking after them, caring for them. If you're buying a pedigree animal or you're buying an animal from a breeder, you're participating in a very cruel and just horrific industry.
So you support getting pets from like a pound over a breeder? Interesting. Okay.
Absolutely.
People are asking me to bring up abortion, but I feel like that's a separate. Well, okay. Actually, it is kind of related. I mean, I definitely think it's related, but I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. I mean, what do you
I
think
mean,
about?
I'll touch on it briefly. I don't want to get like totally sidetracked. Like I
Yeah, yeah,
prefer
yeah. Me
to
neither.
stick on the main. We talk about it for a bit.
Okay. Well, what do you? What is your stance on abortion?
So again, sentience is what matters to me. So from what I have researched, um, basically after the first trimester, you can have like a pretty good chance that there's some pain, there's some sensation, there's something going on that sort of um, is consciousness or is sentience. And I don't agree with having an abortion after that period in time. There are exceptional circumstances such as like rape, or if the baby doesn't have a brain or is already dead in the womb or things like that. But I think, yeah, it's acceptable to a point. I'm generally pro-choice, but my personal view on abortions and what I believe is morally right would be like slightly conservative for a pro-choice person. I think I'm not sure.
Okay. See, that's kind of how I am with animals. Like, I'm pro. I agree. I think a lot of our practices in the animal industry is fucked up, but like I guess I'm meat consumption, pro meat. I'm not pro promoting it per se, but like I don't, obviously in my own life, I'm not against doing it to that point. But like also, so I'm kind of the same way you are, except with animals. I want to get some people from the chat because I don't really have strong counter arguments. Like I don't necessarily disagree with you a lot philosophically here. I think I just have a broader view of consciousness than you, and I view it as like a very big picture thing. Not that you don't, but it's just like, okay, here's the way I view it. Is like, I do value consciousness above everything else, and I think as far as sustaining life to progress to something forward, just like how humans evolved and got to where we are, it just seems to make sense that you need to consume the life that is lower than you in order to get to the next stage. And you're kind of saying, well, no, that's not true because you can just eat plants and stuff. I do wonder, like, on a really macro scale, though, if we can truly, like, what is the way forward in the future? I think it's going to be something that is not even the answer either of us. I don't think it's going to be meat, and I don't think it's going to be plants. It's going to be some sort of way of sustaining our life that is neither of those things. That's what I think is going to happen with technology. So what I'm trying to say is I'm more concerned with how we progress life forward, and not necessarily just living to live. Does that make
So, like,
sense?
how we progress life forward is like through becoming more civilized, basically, and sort of having moral consideration for others. And animals count as others. The animals that you eat, pigs, chickens, sheep, they're all conscious. They're all sentient. Um, they suffer a lot. Not just the animals in factory farms. By the way, like 99% of animal products from America are coming from factory farms. Even so, those animals know what's happening to them when they go into the slaughterhouse. Cows have to have their calves taken away from them immediately after birth in some cases. They're incredibly social animals. Like, chickens can lie to each other. They can have sort of like close friends and enemies. Like, they are individuals with lives that matter to them. Um, like plants, their lives don't, like, of course they want to reproduce, and like some plants even evolve to be eaten. So like any fruiting plant, like they make their fruit sweet and colorful and bright so that animals will eat it, so that they can fertilize the seeds that are in there and spread them around. So yes, life is dependent on other life.
What would you say in a
Why would you?
survival situation? Like, you're out there, let's say there's rabbits, you have a gun, would you be against, I guess not, right? You'd be okay with that, to killing the rabbit?
I'd probably try and check and see what the rabbits are eating first, like if they got any berries around somewhere or some nuts. Like, yeah, if I absolutely had to and I was gonna die of starvation, then like, yeah, I might kill an animal.
Mm.
Um, the thing is, like, 99% of the world is not in that situation. It's not about life or death. It's a choice that people think is personal. It's not personal. Choice to eat meat, to eat animal products involves a victim. Um, they don't want to think about it. They don't like to think about it. It needs to be discussed. It's been ongoing. Like, I don't want people to misconstrue this in the wrong way. I'm comparing the oppression rather than the victims in this case, if that makes sense. Like, what is happening to animals is the greatest Holocaust that has ever happened and is currently continuing on right now. The amount of animals that we kill every year, including fish, is in the trillions. That's more than all of the people who have ever existed on the planet. Like, even if you're not thinking on a deontological level that, like, okay, murder is just wrong, killing is wrong in terms of a sentient being, even if you're just thinking purely on a utilitarian level, like, the amount of suffering that goes on in the animal agriculture industry is enormous.
Mm-hmm. Like, in other words, if you're just measuring the pain they feel, let's say, it is a massive amount, regardless of what you think or don't think. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't really argue against that. I can't really think of. I mean, that seems to be true. I want to know if we have any like hardcore, very educated, informed people on the other side. I don't think. To me, it seems like this whole debate. Not that I've watched a ton of them, but it seems like nobody is really. I think most people acknowledge what you're saying, when you really get down to the foundational level of everything, but they do view it as like a more utilitarian or like nutrition based or these forms of justifying it, let's say.
Oh, I think most people are moral hypocrites. Most people, if they see a dog being kicked in the street, will say something about it and they'll step in.
Mm-hmm.
If they see the animals that we are conditioned to like and appreciate being attacked or harmed or abused in any way. Like, if I took a bolt gun to a dog's head and slit its throat and said, well, it's okay because I want to eat it. I like the way it tastes.
Mm-hmm.
People would be absolutely outraged. And there's this selective discrimination between species. Like, pigs are more intelligent than dogs. They're considered to be about as intelligent as 3-year-old children. Like all of these animals have complex internal lives. There's the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness actually sort of clears this up. But most people are moral hypocrites when it comes to animal abuse.
So the way I view it, I'm sort of a speciesist, and I guess you're not. Like I value, yeah. Do you think that's I mean, what? Yeah, I'm a speciesist, I guess. I think that humans are inherently more valuable than these other things, and well, I guess you probably would agree with that, but you also don't think just because we're more valuable. Do you agree with that? Do you think humans are inherently more valuable?
Don't have to value somebody the same as yourself, or you don't have to value a species the same as your own. Value it more than your taste buds. The choice that you are making is, I value my taste buds more than I do an animal's life. That's essentially the choice that you
I
make
see
when
what
you
you're saying.
buy animal products.
Well, okay. That's not entirely true because it's like saying it's not just taste buds. It's also a form of efficient nutrition. And again, you could say, well, yeah, I know I can have the right diet, the right vegan diet that might be healthy, but do you admit that at least plant based foods are harder? It's a lot more effort required, a lot more time required. There's more that goes into having a well balanced, healthy vegan diet versus if you were just trying to be healthy and you doesn't matter what you eat, including meat.
Really isn't. Like most people in America are deficient in some nutrients. Like if you look at, there's like a study I included in the sources I sent you of like the Epic Oxford group, which took about like 500,000, like hundreds of thousands of participants across like a bunch of European countries. They examined like meat eaters, fish eaters, vegetarians, vegans, all of these different diet groups, adjusted for smoking, age, all of these things. And like each group has its own nutritional deficiencies. Americans, they don't get enough fiber. Like something like 95% of Americans do not get enough fiber in their diet. Protein deficiency is not a problem for people. Protein is in everything. It's in grains, it's in fruit, it's in like, to varying degrees in like every plant. Like every animal that you eat had to get its nutrients from plants. You've got animals like herbivorous animals like elephants that like grow into massive beasts from eating plants, and they're perfectly able to sustain themselves. And also, I would say that human beings anatomically, physiologically, much more similar to herbivores than they are omnivores or carnivores. And I'm happy to go through that with you if you wish.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying, regardless of what American diet is or isn't, I'm just saying as a sort of law of nutrition, it seems to me that something that is more, so meat is inherently going to be more nutrient dense than, and also calorically dense than plant-based food. So it's inherently a more efficient means of getting nutrients. Whether or not people are doing that right or not, I agree. People have the worst fucking diets ever, especially in America. But that's separate from the point I'm making.
It's always compared to what, right? So there are different kinds of meats that are more healthy for you to eat, for example. Eating pure beef fat is not as healthy as eating like heart tissue or something. So yeah, you can say like this food is like more nutritionally dense. By the way, meat is not particularly nutritionally dense. It's very calorically dense. It's very dense in certain minerals, and that's actually a problem for a lot of people. So like preformed vitamin A or retinol is found in abundance in animal products, and that seems to be causing a lot of problems with osteoporosis and things like this. So like people are not, like you don't see vegans in hospitals dying of heart disease and stroke and diabetes. Vegans on average tend to have more normal BMIs. Like vegans are not the people sort of like taking up spaces in hospitals. The people who are taking up space in hospital are people who are eating diets heavy in meat, fat, sugar, like all of these sorts of foods.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so to go back is like, I'm valuing by eating meat. I'm valuing. Um, you're saying I'm valuing my taste buds over um, the life, right to life that animals
Mhm.
have. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like even if I don't necessarily disagree. I guess I have different priorities than you because it's like it almost seems like not you specifically, but a lot of hardcore vegans, they seem to just be super hyper fixated on this animal issue, and it's like I think the way I view it is we need to solve the issues of humans first in terms of get to some higher level of understanding of consciousness with humans, and then we'll take care of the ethics of what we're consuming. Um, you know what I mean? It's like take care of your. It's like the idea of taking care of your kids before you take care of a community or a village. And I view animals as in the broader community of life, but I view humans as like the household. And there's a lot of fucked up things in that household. So again, like deeply philosophically and ethically, I agree with you. I think I agree with you, and I agree probably with a lot of what vegans have to say. I just think the priorities are sort of misplaced.
So the first form of discrimination that you learn is speciesism. I am of the opinion that discrimination is a learned behavior. It's not something that's sort of inherently natural to people. Um, have to be taught how to be racist, how to be speciesist, how to be whatever kind of ist you want to be. And the very first discrimination you learn is which animals we're nice to, which animals we butcher and kill. So if you're being told from a very early age that it's okay to dislike this group because they're not similar to us, they're not like us, they're less than us, that has to follow on to other forms of discrimination because that's exactly where racism and sexism and all of the other isms come from. It's viewing as someone as other than you, lesser than you, therefore you can do what you want to that person, you can treat them how they like. Like even Kant wrote about this, who didn't consider animals, like he didn't necessarily consider them in his moral framework, but the quote is something like, cruelty to animals is contrary to man's duty to himself, as it deadens in him the feelings for their sufferings. So basically, like, just putting it in a more elegant way than I am, that like, if you're going to allow this type of cruelty, this type of discrimination to the most helpless, most like oppressed group of all time, basically, then of course you're going to go on to treat people like that.
Well,
And
that
if you look at a
presupposes.
society, if you want to judge,
Sorry, go on.
you know,
Well, you're kind of assuming that I think that discrimination is the biggest problem, and I never said that. I just said the problems of people, uh, which might involve discrimination, but I don't. In other words, um, I think animals, the most. This might be a big. I don't know. This is a little bit out there for me to say, perhaps, but I actually I'm starting to think this is true. If you had a farm and you were raising animals and you know, killed them as necessary, you raised them as necessary, I think I'm almost starting to think that the value of animals isn't necessarily the nutrients they provide or the taste that they have, but the value of animals is teaching us about how life works. And you might say, well, you could just teach that in a classroom. Okay, sort of, but when you're on a farm, when you're raising animals, okay, you have to face the reality of what you're eating, how it got there. You have to look that animal in the eye and kill it. You have to know how these animals are controlled. You have to. There's this whole system, a microcosm system of society in a farm, basically. And I think the value of that is that when you understand how all of those things work, you understand that people also exist on that continuum. Just like we farm animals, people are being farmed. People are being harvested, not literally, but like, you know, that's what I think we have right now in society. You know, we have people's labor, their people's time, attention being sort of manipulated and harvested and corralled. And so I think the bigger problem is an issue of control and who is controlling what. And to me, most people seem like they're controlled. They're led to think a certain way. They're dependent. They're this, they're that. And if you have a farm, if you raise animals, if you interact with animals in a very, I would say, a more natural way, a way that people have been doing for centuries or thousands of years, perhaps, you understand these very basic fundamental things inherently through experience. You understand that, these animals are drawn by food. They don't care about anything else when there's this food here. And, these animals are, in other words, there's a lot of parallels between how animals act and how people act, okay? And so I guess I'm more of like an agriculturist or something. I don't know what you'd call me, a naturalist maybe. Like, I agree totally. We need to ultimately dismantle all forms of animal agriculture, animal cruelty, all these, things that you would probably agree with. But I think having self-sustained forms of living, which might include animals, is a good way for people to have an understanding of themselves. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not making total sense.
Well, is killing not an act of cruelty? Is taking the child of an animal away from them an act of cruelty? Like, what? How do you define cruelty?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I think here's where I'll draw the line. So, to me, there is nothing ethical about if I were to buy a steak, okay, that was made in a plant somewhere from the cow that was raised by this company amongst a million other cows fed on this diet. But I do view there is something inherently different than if I purchased a cow for my farm. I took care of the cow. I raised it well. It gave birth, and I raised that cow well. And let's just say I didn't even kill this cow. Let's just say I milked this cow and I used its milk. I view there as some sort of reciprocal benefiting system in which I'm taking care of this cow's life. I'm even giving it life in a certain sense. If I'm, giving it the means to give birth or whatever, I'm giving it life and I'm getting some benefit from that through its milk or something. What would you say to that kind of situation?
So that's not the world that I want to live in. So I have I have two cats. I love them dearly. I think they are great companions, and yeah, they're fantastic to have around. I don't want to live in a future where, I mean, I won't, because this stuff will be happening in hundreds of years probably. But I don't want to live in a future with pets or with domesticated animals, because we're taking control of that animal's life, taking them out of their natural situation. Like, my dog depends on me for when she eats, she shits, when she goes for a walk, how much time she gets to spend outside. Like, I choose this for her. She has no agency in how she chooses to live her life. Now, like, she can communicate with me to a certain extent and say, like, hey, I'm hungry, feed me, or like, look at my bowl, I'm thirsty. I don't think we have the right to interfere with other living beings for our own, like, selfish reasons.
Okay. The problem with that is that every single thing that civilization is built on would go against that. And you might say, well, it's not causing direct suffering to animals, so it's different, or it's not direct cruelty, so it's different, or we're not taking the animals. If we're not taking the animals out of their habitat, it's different. And I'm just saying, okay, but then you're just not thinking deeply enough, because every single piece of developed land was probably an animal's house that is, or home, or area, ecosystem that is now destroyed. Who knows how many animals were displaced or starving? I mean, you have this all the time with animal populations, where their entire ecosystem is completely disrupted based on where humans live and have developed land. And so, to what you're saying, I think you're just, you're drawing the line right here. I'm drawing the line right here. But if we're really taking your principle, then we should really draw the line right here. And therefore, how do we have civilization at all? In other words, we need to animals and other forms of life are naturally going to have no say in the world we create.
Yeah, but again, it comes down to what's necessary. And it's not necessary for us to eat animal products. It's not necessary for us to keep pets. We do all of these for our own selfish reasons.
Was it ever necessary? Do you think that? Or no?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, wasn't a lot of food going in like hunter-gatherer times. You just had to eat what you can get. Yeah, like there are necessary situations, and there have been necessary situations in the past, but we don't base our current civilization about what's necessary in the past or what happens in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an appeal to tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we, okay. So if there's imagine some sort of technocratic future where the entire Earth is fully developed, is fully there is no space at all for animals on Earth. And let's say in this thing, we don't have any form of animal cruelty. We're just eating plant-based products, but hey, we're going to be developing this area, and some animals might be displaced. In other words, eventually, the encroachment on animal life on Earth might reach a point where animals are completely out of the equation, and you don't even need to be slaughtering animals for that to be the case. In other words, would you be just as against that?
Could you repeat your point again? I'm just not quite sure.
Okay, so you're saying it's not necessary, and I'm kind of saying, okay, it's not necessary to eat animals to sustain our life and our way of living. Okay. And I'm basically saying, well, technically nothing is necessary. Civilization isn't necessary. Developed land isn't necessary. But you seem to be okay with that because I guess you think that is necessary. And I'm saying, all right, so let's take that to the logical extreme. If we fully develop all land, or like 99% of land, and 99% of animals are wiped out, would you still consider that to be necessary or unnecessary? In other words, where do you draw the line in terms of our encroachment on animals if you completely remove slaughtering them from the equation?
Well, like, by virtue of not having animal agriculture, there would be like, tons more space to grow crops for human feed and to like make housing and stuff like that. So again, veganism is about what is practicable and possible. So people need housing, people need to eat in order to sustain themselves. I wouldn't. The population is actually set to decline, or not set to decline, but at least stop increasing. So I would say with the sort of transition towards plant-based agriculture, which I think will have to happen for environmental reasons, we just cannot sustain having this much animals on the planet. So with that happening, we probably won't be looking at a future like you're describing. But yeah, if there's a choice between like this technocratic society with no animal exploitation and the technocratic society with animal exploitation, I will take the one without exploitation 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is ultimately the goals of humans do not align with the goals of animals. So therefore, at the extreme end of that, whatever that looks like, whatever the future looks like, it's not going to be in favor of animals. It's going to be in favor of humans. Or maybe AI, if that's what we make. And so they're already out of the equation in terms of there is no... the goal, they're already at... Our goals are not aligned. So, whether there's suffering or not, there is suffering, actually, because whether that means animals are starving or their populations are wiped out or their land is encroached on or any number of other things that are not directly related to us consuming them and exploiting them in the ways that you're talking about, there's an issue of goal alignment that is inherently built in. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, You're sort of basing your argument a little bit on an appeal to futility, like, oh well, suffering's going to happen anyway, like encroachment's going to happen anyway. But that doesn't mean that you should deliberately shoot an animal in the head and slit its throat. Um,
I agree. I know, I can even agree with you. I'm
why
not
aren't you
saying.
vegan?
What's that?
Why aren't you vegan?
Why aren't I vegan? Because why aren't I vegan? Because I guess I view it as, well, first of all, I think the future of whatever we consume is coming, and it doesn't really matter whether I'm vegan now or eating meat right now, because the animal industry is still there. And whether I'm vegan or not, I might as, in other words, I don't know. I just view it as a very big picture. I view it as, okay, if in 100 years we're just making lab-created meat and animal agriculture is all gone, it doesn't really matter whether I'm taking part in eating it or not, if it's already being made or not. I'm sure you could find some flaws with that, but
You decide how quickly that happens. Like by you going vegan today, over the course of your life, you will have purchased many, many plant-based products, and you will have avoided contributing to the industry that murders and enslaves animals. So even you as one individual can make a massive difference over the course of your life. If everyone were to adopt that attitude of like, oh, it's a bigger picture, like my personal choices don't matter, then literally nothing would ever change. Like supply and demand is how our systems work. If you vote with your dollar and say, I don't want to pay for this murder, I don't want to pay for this cruelty, you will be part of the solution. You will be part of making that a reality, making life for animals a less excruciating and terrible thing.
okay. Well, here's a better answer then. I only have a certain amount of time, mental energy, and effort I'm willing to put into certain things, and so if I were to put in all my focus on your line of thinking, I might actually be vegan, but because it's like what I was saying earlier, I view solutions in another direction that might ultimately lead to the same idealism that you're espousing, but in a different way, because I'm more focused on these other areas of humans and what we're doing and how to make those things better. So does that make sense? It's just a matter of what I'm willing to put my mental energy into, and being vegan seems to take a lot of mental energy.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And I'm not asking like why aren't you a vegan activist? Like what I'm asking you is why don't you not do something? So why don't you just not buy this thing in the supermarket? Like literally anybody with an access to a grocery store or a supermarket can walk like a meter away from the dairy section and like find the plant milks, find the plant yogurts, and all of those things. It's not asking much to eat a plant-based diet. You can still eat all the stuff you love. If you like burgers, lasagna, like mac and cheese. I don't know what you guys eat in America, but you can still eat all the stuff that you like and enjoy.
We just eat
You can be
burgers
as healthy
exclusively.
as you
We just eat burgers exclusively.
Okay, yeah,
Burgers.
that falls with my idea of Americans. Um,
No, I
like
see what
you
you're
can
saying
basically
though. Yeah.
live your life just as similarly as you do now, and just purchase like different products.
I mean, I know that there's a whole nutrition side of things, but like also another barrier for me is I view it as, again, like like, okay, for example, yogurt in my fridge, which didn't even require the slaughtering of an animal. So I'm like very unwilling to be like, this is cruel. I'm just like, whatever. This is just like an excretion from the animal. I know that there's a big process and that ultimately there's a lot of suffering. I know that, but that's just how I justify it to myself in my head. But it is a principal difference, I think, between slaughtering and... Anyways,
They are slaughtered. Dairy cows are slaughtered at about 6 years of age, which is maybe a quarter of their natural lifespan. They're slaughtered after their production declines and they're no longer profitable to the farmer.
I know, but like the yogurt in there is not literally a dead animal. That's how
It's
surface
not
level I'm thinking.
literally, but it is the result of like death and
Yes.
exploitation. And also, I would argue that there's more suffering in dairy products because you have to take the child of a cow away from them. Cows are like all mammals, because all mammals like breastfeed and like have this connection with their children. It's an incredibly distressing process for them. And I lived in the countryside, like near a dairy farm. I would hear every year the sound of the cows crying
Oh,
after their
geez.
calves, like wailing really
Wow.
loudly. It's quite a distressing thing to like bear witness to. Like, yeah, I would honestly say that like the life of a beef cow, like a grass-fed beef cow, is potentially better and like
That's
less
what I eat. So,
traumatic than the life of a dairy cow.
full disclosure, this is how far I'm willing to go with my ethics with animals. I try to, whenever possible, whenever I purchase meat, which is not very often actually. Um, well, anyways, I eat grass-fed, and organic, free range. I know that those things aren't exactly a huge world of difference, but I'm just saying I am not just a completely blind meat eater. Like, I do try to, more so for nutrition reasons, because I don't even want corn-fed beef and like these kinds of like hormone-raised chickens. First of all, I think it is cruel, and second of all, I think it's disgusting because it's like just I don't want hormones in my food personally. So I try to get
There's
as
loads of
what's up?
there's loads of hormones in the dairy you're eating. Like cows produce piles of estrogen and like
Yeah, but I mean, like, I
female.
don't want these extra like whatever manipulated.
I
Yeah.
yeah.
So, anyways, let's open up the discussion a little bit because, again, I think we've kind of understood each other. I don't even necessarily disagree with you. I just have a completely different line of thought and what I'm willing to put my mental energy and stuff into. But I totally I get where you're coming from. I want to interface with some people from chat if you're willing to. You are willing to? Okay. So, what we might have to do. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna hop in my server. There's a voice channel. I'm gonna invite you, and then we're gonna drag people in from the waiting room.
Right.
Okay, so I'll do that now. Okay, guys, let's go in here. Hold on a second. Here we go. I think I gave her the link. Okay, so she has to hop in here, and then she'll join this thing. Let me see if I can do... I think I can turn on my camera, actually. Oh, there we go. Alright, guys, I know the chat is going fucking crazy. Listen, this isn't even a debate. I never even said debate. This is a discussion, and I was trying to argue some of her points as someone who doesn't even strongly hold a position on this. So, to people being like, wow, what's with all the whataboutism? Like, shut the fuck up. Go back to watching Destiny. I'm having a discussion, okay? And I'm just having lines of thought. I have not planned any of this out. I'm just thought experiments. Maybe I'm saying something that completely makes no sense. I'm just saying what comes to my head. And I think most of it did make sense. So, let me in. Let me in, all caps. Blips. Okay, blips. Hop. Here's what you guys do. So do we have any mods in the chat? We need to get the Discord link. Basically, you have to join my Discord, hop into the waiting room, and then oh, dude, did she even figure it out? Hop in waiting room, and I will drag you to stream discussion. Okay. Is that admitting she beat you? No, there was nothing to beat. I was just having a discussion. I pretty much thought the same. I never thought animal cruelty was good or whatever, or factory. Is it called factory farming or animal agriculture? I think it's called factory farming. I was never in favor of that stuff. But I just have different priorities. That's really what it comes down to. I just have different priorities. Oh, shit. Okay. I've saved you from the simps. Hello.
Hey, you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. We're going to drag people in. Somebody from chat was Blips wanted to talk, but I don't know. He's not in here. So let's see. Okay, I only really want to drag in people who are going to add something of value to the discussion. So unless someone, like maybe someone who either has a good question or strongly opposes what you're saying, if you completely agree with us or you're middle ground, I'm sorry, but it's just, unless you have something worthwhile to add, then there's no point. Let's see. What is the link? Oh man, yeah, I need to link this thing. Hold on a second. I'm going to link my stream in chat for people to join.
I'm just gonna go get some water. I'll be back.
All good. Okay, that's the link, guys. Jesus Christ, this thing had to catch up, so it's just spamming. All right, guys, that's the link to the server. So you're going to join and you're going to hop in here. You know what? Put in your nickname something to do with what you're going to say. So if you're like a hardcore meat eater, put that in your nickname so I know who to drag in. Otherwise, I have no idea who any of you guys are. Put some sort of comment or something by your name so I have an idea of what you want to say before I drag you in from the waiting room if you join the server. Blips is king. Okay, which one is Blips? I don't see him in here. So what is your favorite vegan meal?
My favorite vegan meal? Like anything with potatoes in it. Like I'm an Irish person. I suppose like potatoes are just ingrained. Just simple shit.
Okay.
Potato.
I'm going to try to eat vegan today. For one whole day.
Try to eat vegan for life so that the animals thank you and you're on the right side of history.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe not. Probably not. I'm going to try for one day because I have like this wild caught salmon in the fridge that I was really looking forward to eating, but I'm going to try to just get tofu and shit at the store. So
don't get tofu if you don't know how to cook with it.
No, I know a place.
You're just gonna
I actually know a place in town that makes the whole menu is completely vegan, vegetarian, and vegan, or it's just vegan. There's no animal products, and it's pretty good. It's like Asian food. It's really good actually. I go there sometimes, and I'm not even vegan. Okay, Blips. Oh, he's deafened. Like, I kind of like that one thing. It's called Satan.
Hello?
Yo, Blips.
Yeah, we quit.
What? Yo, no way. Okay. What's up, guys?
What's up, Blips? What do you...
Okay, so...
What's going on?
My position is very similar to Destiny, to be honest. So basically my position is, I think it's completely morally neutral to do basically whatever with animals, but I think environmentally, it should be stopped, and I would advocate for like especially like red meat products and shit like that to stop production and shit like that. But yeah.
Well, do you disagree with murdering dogs, eating them?
Like yeah, it's all morally neutral to me, but I personally wouldn't do it. But like in the same way that eating your own shit is like morally neutral, it's not something I'm into, you know. If that makes sense.
I would say that there is a reason that you're not into that, and that is because you have an inherent moral feeling. Most of us
sounds like you're a Deontologist then, and not a consequentialist.
Wait,
They're
repeat
mine.
what you said?
Like basically, like my whole thing is like social contract, since they can't have a social contract, whereas humans can. Yeah.
What about mentally deficient children or humans? What about children?
Well, it's because you never know if they actually could ever have. Like, the thing is, the social contract will always be inherent to humans, as of we know now. I mean, until then. But with like like mentally deficient children or something like that. You just have to assume, since they're human, there's always going to be that possibility. And even for like young children, obviously they don't have the ability to have a social contract just yet, but later on in life they will probably like most likely have it. Whereas animals that has never been demonstrated ever, you know.
I would say that's like a very rudimentary sort of reading of deontology and of social contract theory.
Well,
because
are
what
you
you
a
were
deontologist? Are you a deontologist or? Yeah, you are. So you're not like a raw utilitarian.
no, absolutely not.
Why is that? Are you religious?
No, I'm not religious. I think utilitarianism has its functions. So, like if you're asking questions about making moral decisions about big groups, you kind of almost have to take utilitarian stance and say, okay, we need to
What's your
like
issue with utilitarianism? I guess. What would be your issue?
My issue with utilitarianism is basically that it doesn't matter about like the intent of your actions. Or
oh no, so yeah, I'm not a pure utilitarian. I'm a raw utilitarian. So I believe informed consent, for example. So like a pure utilitarian, for example, would say like if enslaving 5% of the population to make 95% of the population extremely happy, the net utility, like that's what a pure. But I would say that's immoral because it's breaching someone's consent, basically. So that's why I'm a raw utilitarian.
Yeah, it's basically interfering with their rights, and I think that most utilitarians also have this sort of like rights deontological basis within it. That's kind of my problem with utilitarianism is that
axioms.
Excuse me?
Like axioms, or like.
What do you mean by axioms?
Axioms is like your axiomatic values that you can't justify beyond that point. Like I can't really justify why I want egalitarianism, you know, except for the fact that I think it will help me in a selfish way, I guess. You know.
I just mean like what are you asking me about axioms?
Oh, as in, are you saying axioms as a part of my rule of being a rule utilitarian are kind of deontologist in that way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, like in a roundabout way, that is kind of like what I'm suggesting. That there has to be some sort of like you have to believe
arbitrary line.
Like, do you believe that, like, you have to believe that humans have rights in order to sort of make the decision that you're talking about, which is to not enslave the 5% of people to make the others happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on, real quick. Lauren, you don't believe humans have rights, or inherent rights, rather?
Well, like objectively, like nobody has rights, but I do. Like I believe that a rights-based position is the best position to base your morality off of. That's why I want to extend the right not to use property to animals.
Why say that again? Sorry.
Like, the one right that I want to be granted to sentient beings is the right not to be used as property. Because it obviously doesn't make sense to give them the right to vote or you know, any of these other rights that we offer to human beings. They don't have the same needs as us. But they do have psychological needs, they do have biological needs, and they should be allowed to live out their existence on their own.
Okay, so would you say like you just want to lower overall suffering in the world?
Well, like, yeah, I would like there to be less suffering in the world.
Yeah, I just don't know
it's not
why you would value that, I guess. Because the reason I value the social contract is because it directly like benefits me. Like there's no consequence in me killing an animal. And I know for a fact if it was like, for example, a predator, it would kill me without even thinking about it. You know? Whereas with the social contract, like there's something there that if you don't fuck with my shit, I won't fuck with your shit. It's basically how society functions, you know?
Exactly. And it all basically ties back to the golden rule. So there's all sorts of ways you can put it. The way that I prefer to put it is, do not impose on others what you wouldn't have done to yourself. And so people often view animal rights from the oppressor's perspective, from the person who pays for the animal exploitation, who pays for the abuse. We don't think about the victims.
Yeah, but I just don't see why you value the suffering. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I kind of agree with
Other than it feels icky. Like, I get that, like obviously, like a dog whimpering or something like that, it feels icky. Yeah, but like, I don't base my political or like moral opinions on how it feels. I go by how it directly affects me, like epistemically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I believe that you have to think outside of yourself to be a moral person. So you have to put yourself in the position of the victim. You have to put yourself in others' shoes in order to engage in morality. Like the reason I don't hurt other people or be cruel to them is because I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. If I were an animal, I wouldn't want somebody to leave me, slit my throat, and eat my body. So that's where my sort of fundamental basis.
That's why I disagree.
It sounds like
example,
what Blips is saying is, and I might agree with this, at least, well, right now it makes sense to me, is that he's basically saying, when we're talking about where you draw the line between sentience and consciousness, he's kind of saying, I think, that where you draw the line is where you have the ability to make the social contract of, and that's a good place to draw the line. What do you say to that, Lauren? Like, in other words, animals cannot do that, so therefore
there's no consequence for animals, like killing an animal.
It's not consistent because people extend their moral compassion to people who are not capable of reciprocating it. Like, we don't expect,
like, how so?
Like children, they literally, their brains are not developed.
No, but I would say there's always this that a child will develop to have a social contract. So I think that's fundamentally different.
Hold on a second. Wait, real quick. This is very similar to the abortion thing then. So Blips, are you are you pro-life or pro-choice or whatever? Which one are you?
Okay, so I think it should be legal all the way through, even right until birth. Yeah, like, no, okay, once it's out of the womb, like, yeah, obviously, like, but I think it's murder after detectable brainwaves, because that's the only way you can tell that someone's alive or not. It's through
but if you're being consistent, then what Lauren said about children also applies to what you're saying about a baby who hasn't developed brainwaves yet. If they're viably
because they aren't alive. You can't kill something that's not alive. That's what I'm saying. Because animals have detectable brainwaves. Wait. Right?
No.
Technically alive.
Yeah.
But hold on. You're saying.
No, but by your logic, right, then also sperm would not be, like, that would be genocide, because all those potential people that could have social contract, that doesn't make sense. Like, you get what I'm saying?
What if I agree with you? What if I say jacking off is wrong for that reason?
Okay, well, and then by that logic, like, a person killing one person would kill millions and millions and millions of people by that logic.
Okay, I could see that.
Okay, that just sounds like very irrational to me then.
It is technically killing. Like, in terms of semantics, what you were doing, like when you kill a bacteria, a virus, any of those things, you are killing them. The point of contention is whether it's morally okay to kill this being or this being.
I want to drag in some more people. You can stay here, Blips. Stay here. You guys can continue the discussion.
I'll be quiet though. I'll be quiet.
No, you can still talk. I want you guys to talk. I just want to bring in some people a little bit at a time so that more people can get in, and then you can also can still talk. Okay, so I'm trying to select who I want from here. Oh man, someone had something about soil.
I just wanted to know what she.
Yeah, go on. Keep going. I'll just drag it.
I just wanted her opinion on, like, insects then, because then how would you even go about distinguishing insects from, like, animals at that point, or like fish? Like, to me, it seems so arbitrary to want to stop all suffering, because then that would also have to be for, like, cockroaches, and, like, it just seems really weird to me, I guess.
Well, that comes down to necessity again, and, like, I don't kill insects. I take them out of my house. I, like, remove them. But if you have an infestation of cockroaches and that's going to destroy your house, or you have some sort of pest, then you are justified in, like, doing whatever means necessary to, like, protect your home, protect your health, etc.
I don't know. I don't think that sounds like sort of like an inconvenience argument. Like, sorry, your life is inconvenient to me. So like, yeah.
No, it's
I don't know.
necessary.
It's kind of weird.
It's necessary. I need my home to live.
It seems like your like value and moral system just seems like it could go wrong in so many ways, and be inconsistent. If that makes sense, I guess. I don't know. I'll leave it up to the other guys, I guess, for now.
Okay, Boyardo, your thing is what are animal rights? Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, basically, let me close the stream. Okay. Okay, basically, I don't understand how you can extend the animal rights to animal exactly, because it's a social construct made by us, the humans, and I'm wondering how you can extend them to animals exactly, since they do not have the will to decide.
Hello? Is anyone?
Why do you extend it to mentally retarded people?
Because there's always that assumption that it's very possible that they will have the ability, and I would say 99% of like mentally retarded people have the ability to have a social contract, like of some kind. It doesn't seem like mentally slow people are just suddenly killing everyone on the streets. It doesn't seem like that to me.
But there are human beings who have the consciousness level, the sentience level, intelligence level of an animal and less. So if you're going to...
It's never been shown that animals can have a social contract, where it has been shown with, like...
Well, it has,
always that
amongst
assumption
themselves,
that humans
practice altruism, they practice reciprocity. There's a study, for example, of rats...
Wait, say that again.
Animals do demonstrate reciprocity, and they do demonstrate social contract amongst themselves. So, for example,
how would it
rats,
negatively affect me? Because as a utilitarian, it would have to negatively affect like how my that's. By the way, I understand how incredibly like psychopathic this like kind of moral system sounds, but to me, it's the only one that makes sense to me. And I would never kill an animal in the same way that I wouldn't eat my own shit. Yes, they're both morally neutral, but like it's just incredibly gross to me, if that makes sense.
Wait, hold on. You wouldn't kill an animal, but you would eat them?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
No, because something can be morally neutral while you not wanting to do the action. I said the thing of eating your own shit,
I agree.
Right?
Okay, so I agree that I wouldn't just go out killing animals for fun, but like I wouldn't be opposed to hunting if I'm eating meat.
Yeah. So hunting, I'm fine. Yeah, I would probably hunt. I don't care. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't just like find a random cat and then just like cut it and shit. Like, yeah.
Why? It means nothing to you whether the cat lives or dies.
Because it'd be incredibly bloody, and I would probably get pretty queasy from it. And people generally tend to anthropomorphize animals, and which to me doesn't inherently mean anything. It's just
you're not going to eat it. Why wouldn't you kill a cat? If you're not going to eat it, why wouldn't you kill a cat?
I would try dog meat, honestly. If I was offered it and it was plain and everything.
Forget about taste and what kind of like meat you think would be tasty. Forget about eating the animal. Why don't you have a problem, or like, do you have a problem with somebody just murdering a cat? Murdering a dog.
I would only have a problem if it ended up for them to be more likely to be harmful to actual people and be a danger to society. And it seems as though people who generally do that are people who tend to anthropomorphize it and just want to kill actual humans. Yeah, that's the only reason. Like, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
What do you guys think about bestiality? I'm against it personally.
Technically, my moral system, I have to say it's morally neutral, but I say that with such incredible like cringe. Like, yeah.
Lauren?
Like, I don't. Yeah.
Against what? I didn't understand. Against what?
Against what?
No, you said, are you against something? What? Against something.
No. I said, what do you guys think about bestiality?
Bestiality.
But I want to know what Lauren thinks first.
yeah.
Hold on. Lauren, what do you think
Yeah, I
about
want to hear.
bestiality?
Yeah, I want to hear her. Yeah.
It's wrong because animals can't
Yeah, she's
consent
vegan. Like,
to human beings, and also if you eat meat, if you eat animal products, you're also participating in bestiality. Animals have to be forcibly artificially inseminated in very disgusting and
That's
heinous
true.
ways. So if you are opposed to bestiality and just bestiality
yeah,
alone,
literally,
then
I
the most
agree. Her.
consistent action is to be vegan.
What do you guys think
there's
about
literally,
furries?
like, I mean, like Adam from Why Your Movie Sucks is a furry, like, and that guy's based.
So furries are cool. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like you're kind of insecure about your own shit if you like really care that much about shit like that. I don't know. Like, they can do whatever. I don't
Okay,
give a fuck.
should there be furry schools that indoctrinate your kids to be furries?
Well, I mean, we have fucking Christians who like homeschool, like not much of a difference. I would say they're like way more.
How is there not much of a
damage to
difference?
society.
What the fuck are you
They're
talking
both-
about?
Both based on no evidence. They're both based on no evidence.
What do you mean based on evidence? What is there evidence to be based on? I'm just saying,
What do you
what's a
mean?
better way to raise kids, as furries or as Christians? And you're saying they're both equal?
Oh well, I mean, they're both equally superstitious. Like, if that makes sense.
Towards that group.
I mean, whether
I'm
that's true or
indifferent
not,
about
that has
furries,
nothing to
like,
do with
honestly.
how well they're raised. I'm not asking about whether it's proven
Oh
by
yeah.
science
They're
that
probably,
furries are
like, I would
good.
say. Yeah, but like.
Anyways,
I
that's a
don't-
whole different discussion.
Like, that's
Sorry.
incredibly niche. Like.
This is a whole separate discussion. I don't want to get too far. That was just funny.
I'll let the other guys like.
Yes. Okay. So Berardo or Doggo guy, you haven't talked. I don't know. What's your name? Thomas. Thomas. Some can't feel pain. You have the floor. Someone said Doge pick guy. You are so quiet.
Who's pick guy? That's me. What about me?
Yeah. What's your deal, dude? I mean, what did you want to say?
I just want okay. I just wanted to ask about so like. Okay, yeah, like Thomas the Tank Engine in the chat. Okay, I was mainly gonna ask about like.
Don't worry about the chat. Don't read the chat. Don't read the chat.
So, for instance, jellyfish can't, like, they're biologically incapable of feeling pain.
Mm.
So jellyfish are biologically incapable of feeling pain. They don't have the proper pain nerves, and they do not have a brain. So, would it
Not
be
all
wrong
jellyfish,
to
by the way,
harm
but I
and
follow.
consume them, or is it because they're simply an animal? It's not right. Since they don't feel pain, then jellyfish are on the table, right?
It may have other capacities.
Well, you mean like how plants also have reactions to pain?
No, like I'm not like particularly. I don't have strong feelings on the killing of jellyfish. My problem is with the absolutely sentient, absolutely capable of feeling pain animals that people eat on a day-to-day basis. People don't really fuck with jellyfish. No, like it's all well and good to like divert the conversation and say, well, what about this animal that's not quite sentient? What about that animal that's not quite sentient? Like, I'm probably pretty much on the same page as you guys when it comes to sort of discussions about this. I like to be sort of generous and just give these animals the benefit of the doubt. But I would say like mostly in agreement in terms of how you should sort of respond in these situations.
Yeah, so how am I gonna say this? Wouldn't that like, but they're still an animal, right? So wouldn't that be discriminatory against other animals? Like your argument, like I remember somewhere earlier during the stream, it was like, oh, you know, people are discriminatory against certain animals, like, but wouldn't that be discriminatory against a particular animal?
See, there's arbitrary discrimination. There's arbitrary discrimination, and then there's discrimination that like has a purpose. So, for example, if you were like researching a scientific topic want to discriminate against certain papers because you need to find like the correct information. Arbitrary discrimination is making a like decision or a choice on an ultimately arbitrary component like species, for example. Where we draw the line of consciousness and sentience in animals is a difficult question, a difficult line. But really, it doesn't concern 99% of people. The type of exploitation and cruelty that people participate in is mainly animal agriculture, which is not cultivating jellyfish.
Yeah, but like, shouldn't we then make the primary like animal industry then like about jellyfish?
What?
Like, wouldn't that be?
I think it would be a lot nicer.
Solution? Wouldn't that benefit both
I
parties?
think it would be. That's not my
I feel like
conclusion,
this guy's a
because
troll.
I'm not a troll. What? I'm just saying, like they don't feel pain, and therefore, like, it wouldn't be like, you know, mandated veganism or whatever.
It's kind of like
we would just-
SpongeBobitarianism.
What do you mean, bro?
Wait, let me
like,
bring in one
hunter-gatherer,
guy. You guys can continue, but I want to bring in. Oh fuck, where'd he go? Okay, I'm gonna bring in this ex-hunter farmer guy, whatever.
Hello.
Yo, ex-hunter farmer Zarab, you have the floor.
Arena.
Hello.
Ex-hunter, welcome to the arena.
Can I talk to him in the meantime, I guess?
Brother?
Yes.
Oh, wait, no, he's it.
Say something. Hello.
Yeah, hi. Maybe you hear it from my accent. I'm not very an English person. And I spent like the most life on some very shitty place. Like somewhere nowhere in Siberia. And we had like, it was even before the Iron Curtain fell. So we had like zero technology.
Holy shit, you're hardcore.
Yeah, and it's kind of haunting me to this day, to be honest.
Jesus.
And my point that I will make here is, we are as a society are more like disconnecting from this process of killing an animal, and I think this is like the biggest factor that most people don't think about their consume. So I think when we could like show them more of the aspects how this process is done. For instance, with like zero technology, you have to kill it with basically your own hands. You don't have a stun gun, and you have to be very spare with bullets because someday you have maybe to go to hunt because animals don't always survive the winter, for example. And also goes for the crops and the plants. So someday you just have to kill an animal that you like raised from the beginning, and it's very hard. It can be very brutal and heartbreaking. Because if you don't have like that much of technology, you also can't like freeze it. So you have to leave it in the winter, like just in the snow, the corpse, and just to take it all day when you need it. So it's very harsh, and I think that some people don't see this aspect, because like Blips was talking about that he likes to eat it, but he can't just kill it. And I see
I can hunt it.
you can hunt it. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's very hard.
I'm not just gonna kill like a random cat. Like fuck that. Like
No. Well, another point is the value of an animal, because I think that dogs and cats, for example, have a completely different value than a sheep or a cow, because simply that dogs are useful for
why?
protection.
That's so arbitrary.
No, not in the wilderness. You have to take value from different animals, because some can provide you more positive aspects than others. Because a cow like can give you milk, for example, but the pig can't. So you are more likely to kill the pig because it's more useless in an critic situation.
Yeah, but like watch the what's her name? Sorry.
Here my name is You can just call me Vic.
Oh, no. I was saying the vegan girl. What's her name?
Lauren.
Lauren? Oh, Lauren. Yeah. So what Lauren would say, I would assume, is that the actual act itself is immoral, like whether you get something out of it for a different reason or not, right?
See, this is the problem I have is that what Zarab, is that am I saying that right? What Zarab is saying makes so much more sense to me. Like this whole moral issue of whether to be vegan or not, or like all these things, this only arises out of the practice of the modern day society of essentially farming animals as we do. But the more connected we are to our food source, this wouldn't be a moral question. It would be, there would be suffering, but it's like shared suffering. It's like, that's kind of what Zarab is saying, is like you raise this animal, you yourself are suffering because you're in freezing winter, and God knows where. Like we're so disconnected from our food source. That I view as the problem.
Yeah, that's what is kind of hard to talk about. It's even now to this day. So if you think about these pictures, you're like treating it with so much respect. So
I just feel like that kind of line of argument though is like very feels based though. Like if that makes sense, it's more like
respect means nothing to the animal.
It might even if it is even if it is feels based, that is not a counterpoint. Like feels are just as legit. This is all about feels. Suffering is feels.
Based on like a value. Like I'm talking about like with a moral system. Yeah, like something can feel bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean it actually is bad. Like fundamentally, that's what I'm
saying. Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. I sound
like a cringe, like Ben Shapiro. Like I don't know.
No, I mean I agree. That's what I'm saying with Zarab's point is that you can't remove suffering from the equation in order to sustain life. But the problem I see is that we're astronomically increasing the suffering and also astronomically reducing the responsibility by being so disconnected from our food source. And I want an equal level of responsibility and suffering.
So you want to go back to hunter-gatherer, I guess?
I don't see that's not really practical. But it would be ideal, but it's not really practical. So I don't know. I don't have the answer.
I mean, to back up what you're saying with like being disconnected, I've heard they've done studies on like with in the 60s or something that people want the meat to not look like the original animal as much as possible. Like, that
makes sense.
Yeah.
And people who work in slaughterhouses and abattoirs have incredibly high rates of suicide and incredibly high rates of mental illness. Even if you just care about the human suffering involved, slaughterhouses are not nice places to work. In terms of like, talking about necessity, like living in Siberia is one of those situations where, look, it's not really going to be a practical option to be a vegan unless you're living in a big city. But the point is, most people are not in that situation. Most people have access to grocery stores. They don't need to go hunting. Hunting is also an entirely unsustainable way for people to get their food. All of human civilization has been based on grain cultivation. That's what builds cities. That's what keeps people alive. The diseases of the rich, heart disease, diabetes, like all of the ruling class throughout history have always been notoriously sick because they eat rich foods like animal products and cheeses and things like that.
It used to be a luxury product.
Your life, those people,
Meat used to be a luxury product like 150 years ago.
Hold on, I take issue with what you just said. I don't think animal products are solely to blame for diseases, and I think the links you're talking about.
Wait, was she saying that?
Is that correct, Lauren?
I don't think she'd be that reductionist.
No, animal products are not the cause of all disease, but animal products are the cause of like the top 10 like leading causes of death in the West.
That's actually not necessarily true. That's not true. It's
I've already talked about it.
So the thing is, you have to look at all of this in context. This is nutrition science, is notoriously constantly wrong because, for example, what you're saying, saturated fats and stuff, which have been largely demonized and kind of pointed to as the cause for a lot of these issues isn't actually the cause of these issues in itself, because a lot of these studies are done without accounting for the totality of what people are eating. Now, to your point, I would say eating a very rich diet when it comes to like eating a lot of starches, a lot of simplified carbohydrates, a lot of grains in addition to saturated fats is bad, because there's a lot of science about that. But in other words, the combination of things is bad, and the combination involves things that are not even animal products themselves. So like you can be extremely unhealthy with being a vegan for the same reason. If you're eating a lot of saturated fats,
Oreos,
and oils with, and Oreos, whatever, a lot of things that are extremely rich in these things. And so it's not exclusive to animal products, and they're not the sole cause of these problems either. Does that make sense?
No, processed and refined food is also a problem, whether it's vegan or non-vegan. But humans are physiologically adapted to eat plants, and I can explain a number of reasons for this. Also, when I talk about nutrition science, I'm not talking about the totality of nutrition science. About, I would say, 50% minimum, about 50% minimum of the studies that are published in nutritional journals are published by industry-funded backers. The vast majority of those, the vast majority, are the beef checkoff, the dairy checkoff, the Dairy Council, the egg industry. They massively pollute nutrition science with very dodgy research. I've looked at a lot of these papers personally myself, but I would say that the best evidence that we have, the Adventist Health Study, has about 100,000 participants. It's been going on for over 20, 30 years. They control for other variables, lifestyle, exercise, smoking, alcohol intake, like down to the finest detail. And I have that study linked, so you can go through it.
Is this one study?
Okay, which one is it? Link it here, or you linked it to me? Where did you link it?
Yeah, you should have it. Hang on.
Also, I'm gonna take this moment to read some super chats really quickly, if you guys don't mind. So I got $2 from the unknown Utaku. He said, "Animals don't deserve moral consideration." I got $2 again from the unknown Otaku, who said, "I would love to jump into this, but love to watch." Well, you can jump in if you're in the waiting room. A cat donated $5 Canadian. Eating animals directly contributes to the presence of zoonotic diseases like West Nile swan flu. I think he meant swine flu. Glad cow disease. I think he meant mad cow disease. And mychirona. Okay, this guy's trolling. Thank you for the $5 Canadian. Also, a cat donated $2 saying, "Buy Lauren more cigarettes." Lauren, you're not concerned about health, clearly, so let's not make this a nutrition-based argument.
I don't care about health personally, but I'm incredibly well researched on nutrition science. Like, I wrote a biology paper about nutrition science in my first year of my degree. I do. I sent you that study, by the way. Yeah, you can compare. If you look at all of the big meta-analyses that are done by independent groups and independent researchers, you see an appropriate level of granularity in the studies. That is, they controlled for other variables, i.e. smoking, exercise, alcohol intake, caffeine, etc., etc. If you evaluate that evidence, you will see that vegans do not die of heart disease nearly as frequently as meat eaters, do not develop diabetes, have normal BMIs. There's also the EPIC Oxford study.
Okay,
and the broad study. And also a plant-based diet is the only diet that's been clinically shown to reverse heart disease. And I have images of arteries literally opened up from people being put on a whole foods plant-based diet. There is mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence for this. Also, the lipid hypothesis is, despite its name, a very well-established theory in nutrition science. There are very, very few people who dispute the lipid hypothesis. And most of those, like the main advocates, like Nina Teicholz, she has connection to the beef industry. Like most of these people who are advertising and saying butter is back, cholesterol is not bad for you, saturated fat is not bad for you. 99% of those time you will find them having links to some sort of animal agriculture industry.
Okay, a couple things. One, I got another $2 donation from Bans. He says, "Damn, Lauren came prepared. Vegans for the win." So you have some vegan fans. They're really rooting for you. You could be the vegan, you could be the next vegan Gaines. So a couple issues. Again, you're more so arguing for the health benefits of a vegan vegetarian diet, and I won't even dispute that. I'm just saying there is no provable link, direct link of animal products themselves to heart disease or any of these conditions. These links are all established based on faulty studies. And also, yeah, I mean, again, like, nobody's eating just meat by itself. So you can't even establish a link based on these studies at all. You're not eating a burger with just the link seems to be between high carbohydrate intake and high saturated fat intake. That seems to be the problem, not either one of these things on their own.
I have to stop you right there.
Okay.
Carbohydrates are an incredibly diverse group of macronutrients. That's down to simple sugars and complex carbohydrates like found in wheat and
Simple
sweet potatoes.
carbohydrates, that's what I meant.
Whole grains. And yes, people lack those in their diets as well. There is a provable link between the intake of saturated fat and heart disease. That is a link that you can find across any well-designed study, any well-designed meta-analyses, not polluted by industry funding.
So wait. That link you're talking about, Lauren, these, do you acknowledge that nobody's eating saturated fat and meat on its own in any of these studies, right?
No, but these studies control for those factors. They break down what people are eating, and they can discern from that, like, the more you increase saturated fat, the more likely you are to get heart disease.
Okay. But how can you control for one?
No,
You cannot control for one part of it. In other words, nobody, correct me if I'm wrong, but these studies are not done on carnivore diets exclusively. So in other words, somebody is not, okay, if I'm eating 5 burgers a week.
You know why?
Do you get what I'm saying? If I'm eating 5 burgers a week.
I think this is just lifestyle. It's not only the meat or the vegetables. It's also depending how much movement the person has, and yeah.
Yeah, but even when you control just for diet, you cannot just control for just the meat unless you're studying someone who's only eating meat, which none of these studies are doing.
Well, you can, and there are randomized controlled trials showing so. Like Dr. Esselstein's paper, Weight Reverse CAD, that study included about 200 and so people. And what he did was he got them to eat an entirely whole foods plant-based diet. Now, this was very restrictive. There was no oil added to the diet, no animal products whatsoever. They were even, like, not allowed to eat nuts, as far as I'm aware. I think brown flaxseed was the only sort of fat that they were getting in their diet. And so, if I get it up here, like 94 of adherent patients saw symptom reduction. So that means the plaques in their arteries started to improve. Their arteries weren't as blocked and shitty anymore. Percent of those people saw complete removal or complete reversal of the disease. So you can see both in epidemiological studies a trend with increased saturated fat and animal product consumption and increased risk of heart disease. And you can see when you take out specifically those products and put those people into a randomized control trial where you control everything that they're eating, you can show that actually reversing heart disease, not just halting it.
Okay, but that still doesn't prove what, I mean, I've heard these arguments many times, but it actually doesn't prove it, because what you're saying is these people are consuming meat as a part of a meal, okay? And the meal might involve simple carbs or complex carbs, whatever else it involves. They're not just eating meat. So when you take away meat from the equation, suddenly you're saying that part of these plant-based diets, they're healthier. And I'm saying, okay, that's fine, but you would also have to do something on the other side of things where you remove. What I'm talking about is the combination. So in other words, if you remove simple carbohydrates or you remove something else and you just keep the meat, I think you'd probably see the same thing. And I think there are studies showing that. I don't have them on hand, but in other words...
Look, there's a trend.
What is
There's a trend. So even the vegans who are eating simple sugars, who are eating processed food, even those vegans are doing better health-wise than people who are eating those things and eating animal products. Like, sugar alone does not cause diabetes, what causes diabetes is having extra fat in your cells. And because you have that fat in your cells, your body's insulin response is affected.
And I'm saying,
so if you don't have that fat instigating it, and you eat loads of sugar, you will not develop diabetes.
Right, and in the same right, and I'm saying if you don't have the sugar and you just have the fat, that's the other way of things. That also is not a problem. So having a balanced diet seems to be the answer of complex carbs.
Even if you compare people with balanced diets and healthy lifestyles across the spectrum, like in the Adventist study, you see a trend towards less heart disease, less diabetes, less chronic illnesses as you go along towards veganism. The Adventist study especially, because they divide between meat eaters, pescatarians, vegetarians, and according to the intake of once per week, never, etc., etc.
Are they also controlling for their lifestyle completely in those studies?
Exercise, alcohol. It's like one of the most granular, well-designed studies I've seen. And it's on a pretty massive scale. But the Loma Linda vegans are the longest lived population in the world as well.
I thought the longest living population are the Okinawans.
They're actually in second. They're in pretty close space. They're declining pretty quickly though because of the Western diets that are coming into Japan.
But they eat
currently,
meat
on average, the average life expectancy of a vegan Seventh-day Adventist in Loma Linda is higher than the average life expectancy of anybody else in the world. Now, Okinawa has more centenarians, so they have more people who live beyond 100 years old, but their average life expectancy is actually lower than Seventh-day Adventist vegans.
It seems like we're splitting hairs, but the answer seems to be removing as much processed food from your diet as possible and eating a balanced diet of nutrients, right? Including processed meat. I think processed meat is probably bad too, but that's why I think grass-fed meat and these other healthier options are better. Could you acknowledge that?
Grass-fed beef is still loaded with saturated fat and cholesterol. Besides that, animal protein is made up of sulfur-containing amino acids, which are highly acidic. And your body has to neutralize that acid once it comes into your bloodstream. Now, it was theorized that phosphate was taken out of the bones and calcium to compensate for this and neutralize the acid in the blood, but not quite sure that those results haven't quite been replicated. But animal product ingestion does cause acute acidification of your blood, and saturated fat and cholesterol are 99% of cardiologists and 99% of people who study nutrition they don't disagree with the lipid hypothesis. It's a fairly well established theory in nutrition science.
So you said cholesterol and fat are in all animal products, or even the grass-fed ones, and I'd say to that, cholesterol and fat are not inherently bad, and in fact your body needs cholesterol, and cholesterol is not even an indication of heart disease or blockage at all. A certain type of cholesterol it is, ADL, or which one? I don't know the exact name, but there's a certain type of cholesterol that is, but actually having cholesterol is just a marker for your hormone balance or something like that. It's not even a bad thing. You can have plenty of cholesterol in your blood and still be perfectly healthy. And also, I'll say to the toxins of meat, yes, that's what I'm saying. There's actually studies on this too. To counterbalance that, it's good to have fresh green vegetables and things like that with consuming meat. That's what it all. In other words, the evidence points to having a balanced diet. It doesn't point to have one thing. Because if you just have vegetables, by the way, vegetables themselves, like broccoli and other things, they also have toxic effects in your body when not neutralized by something else. So that's why there's a balance that I'm trying to point to.
The toxins that are found in plants are largely just removed during the cooking process. So oxalates, I think the other things they're afraid of are lectins. These are generally not consumed due to the cooking process. No matter what kind of meat you're eating, whether it's the healthiest thing in the world, does have saturated fat and cholesterol. And yes, your body needs cholesterol, but it makes all of the cholesterol that it needs because humans are physiologically herbivores. What happens when you give cholesterol to herbivores is they develop heart disease. Now, dogs that are true omnivores and can survive very well on either type of diet, you remove something called their thymus gland, or is it their thyroid? One of those two glands, if you remove that in dogs, you can actually get them to develop heart disease. So basically, it's thought that there is some sort of process going on in the thyroid of omnivores and carnivores to be able to deal with cholesterol and not have complications with that. Herbivores like humans, like other herbivores, will develop heart disease if you add excess cholesterol into their body. That's exactly what your doctor will check for. Like if you just go for a regular checkup, they want to check your cholesterol. Because most people have elevated cholesterol, and it's a direct marker for developing heart disease. It's why it's one of the most widely tested.
I actually don't think that's true. Cholesterol on its own is not a marker for heart disease. It's cholesterol in combination with other markers.
I think you see this just from a very
Like your
comfy
triglycerides or
life
something.
perspective. I think that a balanced diet is the best one. You can't just ignore eating meat when you are in a critical situation, because we are like have a very good situation in the first world countries, and so we are not very dependent on it. But when we are like talking about efficiency, how people can strive for more action, they need different kinds of fats and proteins, because it will tear you down if you have to work very hard for your food and also consume like a very low amount of those energies with only fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, I mean, everything points to omnivore and balanced thing. Like, again, with plants, another problem I've heard with plants is, strictly plants, is that there's so much to break down for your body that it's actually very taxing on your body to constantly have to break down, especially some of the more cruciferous vegetables that do have certain toxins that your body has to neutralize and break down. Now you're saying, there's certain ways to prepare it and cook it and stuff. Sure, but I'm saying I don't know the details on that. I'm sure that you could counteract that some way in terms of preparation, but you could also just counteract it by having a more balanced diet. And also, Lauren, if you'll acknowledge that there is a sort of meat industry incentive with these studies, do you also acknowledge that there's a huge sugar industry incentive to demonize saturated fats and also promote carbs? Like we have this whole low-fat craze, or we had, I guess, that was entirely propagated by the sugar industry. And sugar is a drug, an addictive drug.
Misdirected sort of outrage. Not that you're outraged, but just that you're.
I'm a little bit outraged. I don't like the sugar industry.
It's like towards the sugar industry, and like yes, the sugar industry wants to preserve itself. It wants to sell its products. But saturated fat is not a problem for sugar, because what is the thing that sugar is sold with most of the time?
Mm-hmm.
It's sold with fast food. It's sold with products that are high in saturated fat. Burger buns that you get, the white burger buns, they're sold with saturated fat. So it would be very unlikely that the sugar industry would want to take down its sort of like bedfellow in the fat industry, or like animal product industry. The people who are putting out the studies that are casting doubt about saturated fat and its damage to human health are the meat and dairy industries. The dairy industry specifically has like caught sending emails like literally explaining that like, yeah, we're trying to confuse people and we're trying to make saturated fat seem like it's not a big deal. You can also like cite like, okay, there was a low fat trend maybe in the 1970s, and like there's been sort of other trends of it. But there's also been trends of low carb diets since like the 1970s. You had the Palm Beach diet, you have the Atkins diet. Those are all low carb, and they're from like the 70s and 80s. Even back to the 70s, have it again with keto diets and paleo diets. People are drawn towards those things because they think, oh, great, I can eat all of the shit that I love. Like I can eat bacon and rashers and just loads of processed meat.
But the same thing can be applied to the other way. When people have low-fat things, oh, great, I could eat crackers and this low-fat ice cream. I mean, the same thing goes the other way. We're just talking past each other. I'm saying I acknowledge what you're saying. I'm just saying the answer isn't to remove one thing completely from the equation. It's to have a balance of both. Now, if you're saying there's an ethical reason, okay, well, whatever. I mean, I guess that's separate because you're saying there's these studies that show hardcore, just straight up vegan and vegetarian diets in the long term with controlled studies have been shown to be more healthy. I would have to take a look at those actually because I haven't heard of that. But anyways, I think we understand where each other is on that. But let's bring in more people who might want to talk less about nutrition and more about other things. I'm going to read this £2 actually donation by Space Mongoose. Thank you for that. Lauren is based. Thanks for having her on. Wow, you got a lot of fans, Lauren. Okay, let's bring in. Okay, Mr. Boyardo and Zarab. We're going to kick you guys for now. I'm going to see if I can bring in more people.
Okay, see ya.
Okay, can I just say one thing?
Okay.
Okay, it's just a setup because I saw previous lives of yours, and there was this one about theism versus atheism, and I want to have a more in-depth discussion because there were things that weren't that much clear. If you want, we can talk about that later day if you want.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm busy, but possibly, yes.
Just let me know, okay?
I will.
It was interesting, but also very confused.
Okay, we can talk. Well, maybe I'll have another stream like that. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Later. Okay, let's figure out who to bring in. Someone says XSDA. Do you know what that means? SDA? We have a meat
SAD?
eater. Huh?
They're trying to say SAD, Standard American Diet. I don't know.
Maybe. Someone else says meat eater cook. Someone says let's talk mortals ? Someone says in a defense situation. Someone said cultural acceptance and economic. Okay, let's bring this guy in. That sounds maybe interesting. Hello, cultural acceptance and economic. What do you have to add? Oh, Seventh-day Adventist. Okay, I'll bring him in too.
Hey guys.
Yo.
All right. So I kind of noticed that this discussion was getting a little bit off on track, so that's why you started adding new people, right?
Oh, I don't think it's off track. We were just focused on the nutrition rather than other things.
Gotcha. I'm just trying to get myself oriented, I guess.
Okay, what do you want to add to it, or what do you want to say, or do you want to...
Well, quickly, before my therapist calls me out of nowhere in a bit, I just wanted to get this more towards the very realistic aspects of it, such as like cultural acceptance and economic viability, because I feel like these issues are a bit more, they're a bit more important to veganism as a whole being accepted in society, especially since, come on, man, let's be real. If your pocket hurts, you're gonna care. Yeah. Everyone's gonna care, regardless. So, the way I see it is, someone mentioned to me in chat about the economic viability of raising animals and how labor and land intensive it is, and how this can have an effect on that kind of stuff. Like eating vegetables, going to being a diet, it's a good alternative, but as society sees it, as in economic and cultural ways, it's just meat is more established. There's the infrastructure, there's a lot of money into it, there's preconceived notions. So regardless, veganism is going to take a very long time to take hold.
I agree with that, but since this is a discussion on the ethics of meat consumption, I have to add that just because something is established does not mean that it is moral or ethical.
Oh man, I forgot about the ethic part about it, actually.
So, Snaz.
Actually,
you're a Seventh-day Adventist, or you were? Is that what your name says?
I was, yeah. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist.
I don't even know what those are.
I went... Yeah, it's a little bit fringe. There's not too many of them, but they're basically like Christians, but they go to church on Saturday, A lot of them are vegan, or not vegan, but a lot of them are vegetarian, rather. And, a few of them are vegan, but a lot of them are vegetarian. And for me, it was pretty easy to transition from omnivore to vegetarian, given that the culture around me had a lot of really good vegetarian foods available.
Okay. So what do you want to add to are you a vegetarian now or meat eater?
Yeah, currently I'd call myself a vegetarian. I try to buy vegan, but when I'm out and about, I just go vegetarian because it's easier at restaurants and stuff. But yeah, I would just wanted to, I don't know, I had a few things to add, but wanted to bring it back towards the ethical discussion here because it seemed like we're getting off track on the diet aspect. And the diet aspect, there's some studies both ways there. It's going to be hard to get the right nutrients whether you're eating meat or not eating meat.
I agree.
You still got to put in effort to do that.
Balance.
That's fair.
Exactly.
Well, I actually have an interesting take on the ethical part of it. I actually am fully aware of the suffering that my eating meat causes, and I actually agree with this fine woman here about how fucked up it is, because it really is fucked up. I mean, think about it. Thousands of years, millions of animals caged, locked up, all that type of stuff. It's regardless of pain, regardless of how aware they are as a species, it's really fucked. But I'm still gonna get my burger though, because it's like that.
Why is it like that? Why?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're aware of all the things that happen when you purchase this product, why do you still continue to purchase it?
Well, because first of all, I'm not emotionally attached, so it's very easy be like, I believe his name was Ponce Pilat, wash my hands type thing, But it's a lot about ignoring, It's kind of like compartmentalization of my ethics, but a lot of the times I do question it. And personally for me, I try to look at it rationally, because it doesn't hurt it's too much to beat yourself up about it when this is the way things are for a lot of people, and it's very easy to excuse myself like this. But I do end up thinking about it, once fake meat becomes more viable, especially in a lab-grown sense, where there's not really any brains suffering, because then it would possibly be meat just being grown on its own without any way being connected to a nervous system. I'd be totally down for that. But as things are right now, it's fairly easy to ignore suffering, just based on the way that society is and how I don't have to personally kill my animal.
I actually kind of agree with you, because that's the way I mean, I don't know if I would use the same words to describe it, but the thing is, that's kind of what I'm saying is like, the problem is that we're so disconnected from our food sources, and I have absolutely no hand in how we got here, and I also don't really have a hand in how we go forward. I mean, I guess I technically do, but my concerns are much elsewhere other than how I get my nutrients, because it seems like we've evolved. Seems like humanity, for better or worse, in some ways better, in some ways worse, has disconnected from their food sources and evolved past food as an obstacle for life. And so, as a part of that, animals are at the cost of animals being heavily exploited and killed and suffering. That has made it possible for us. And that's just the world we live in. And instead of like trying to justify that wrong or whatever, I'm just kind of accepting it. And I'm like, I'd rather put my mental energy into something else going forward, which might involve alleviating the suffering of animals, but that's just not my main focus ultimately. But anyway.
Yeah, I get you. Everyone's more focused on their day-to-day survival, money, the people that affect us around us, all that stuff is very logical and very reasonable. And that's where I see the divide in both sides coming in, Look, vegans are more focused on ethical growth, and we're more focused on realism. And my kind of approach to it is that, eventually veganism, artificial meat is going to become more economically viable.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to compromise my morals for the meantime,
That's
especially since I'm not actually inflicting the death and suffering on these animals, because eventually it will happen, and most likely in our lifetimes. But I do see, as messed up as it is that I accept the suffering of all those animals, I wish that I personally would be more ethical, because, it is kind of messed up if you think about it too much, and like I can admire your goal to like, you know, champion the ethics, you know, not partake and do a vegan diet miss? Because, you know, I would do that if I was that type of person, but I'm not.
Okay.
But I do admire that because
Like, I'm not that type of person either. I don't do activism full time. This is the first debate that I've had online with anybody about anything. I just talk about this with my friends and family and anybody who wants to listen.
but the best type of activism is action. And that's what you do. You act, you eat, you don't partake. That's the biggest form of activism, in my opinion. The action of it.
Well, it's sort of a form of protest, all right, but like that takes like the least amount of effort out of me, like to make food. I have to make my food anyway. I would have to go to the shop and buy animal products. I would have to cook my food if I want to like eat healthy and get enough nutrients. You don't have to devote a lot of energy to it at all. Like I have other concerns. I work teaching English for $10 an hour online, and I'm a full-time student, and I have like concerns and like wants and desires of my own outside of veganism. But I don't think that I need to take lives and contribute to suffering along the way to attain those things.
But do you acknowledge, Lauren, that your lifestyle, like you, what you just said there, actually opened my mind up for a second, because you go and shop for your meals, it sounds like, and you go and prepare your food. And I think we could all admit, if that's what each of us all did individually, even just that, which, you know, we're still buying, or it's not like we're raising or whatever, you know, it is easier, you're right, because you have to make the conscious decision, at least in the supermarket, to be like whether I buy meat or not, you know. Whereas a lot of people, they don't really make those, they don't even make those decisions. You know, they'll go to fast food, they go eat out, they do Uber Eats, somebody else prepares the food for them, or, you know, any number of other things. So in a way, actually, I think, yeah, like I agree. Like you are more connected, even if marginally, to your food source than it sounds like a lot of people are. But also you have the choice to be. Like somebody in the chat was saying, you know, go tell an inner city person to be vegan or something. It's like, yeah, it's right. Like, you know, somebody who's just getting by and whatever and can only afford, you know, just McDonald's and just goes to the cheapest grocery store. Maybe a big part of their diet is something that they don't even have that much of a choice in. Maybe it is some burger. Maybe it is something that they don't fully prepare or have the time to prepare. You get what I mean?
I have lived that as well, and I have lived that as a vegan, and I've done it in 2 different countries. Like I've lived on a diet of like rice and chips and like just tins of beans and like shitty food and takeout and stuff like that. So you can do both. You're not restricted to, like, I'm not super healthy all the time. I'm not like going to the grocery store and like getting all of the healthiest foods. Like I eat because I enjoy eating. Might start thinking about my health a little bit in the future. I'm like 21 now, so I'm like, I've got a couple of years I can sort of smoke and do those things.
Just smoke for a few more years.
But like, exactly. But you know, you don't have to be like, there are all of these sort of like monolithic stereotypes about vegans. Like they're privileged, they're white, they're eating really expensive vegan food and replacements and stuff. But there are like Rastafarians who are vegan. There are like Jain monks in India who are vegan. It's a really like diverse group of like varying degrees of like money and privilege and power and influence and stuff.
What's your
I
favorite
have to
type of
agree with
vegan?
that completely. I just got through college and I spent a lot of time just eating rice and beans for dinner, and that'll get you through, and that's, you know, 5 cents a day, and that's vegan.
What's your guys' favorite type of vegan? Mine is Rastafarian. Mine is Islander Caribbean vegan. If I was living there, I could be vegan.
I'm too used to meat. I'm sorry.
My favorite vegans are just ethical vegans. There's kind of a trend now for veganism being like a sort of healthy thing, a diet thing, or environmentalist thing. And like, while I admire the cause of like improving public health and I admire the cause of environmentalism, main concern is just not fucking over the animals. And that's what veganism should be about. It should be about animal rights. But the other stuff just helps support like how ridiculous it is to not be vegan nowadays.
I'm gonna bring in a meat eater cook. Hello, Shaggart.
Hello.
Howdy.
So, what's your stance here?
I guess my stance is I am a meat eater. I do like cooking meat a lot. I find I'd say there's a couple of points I want to make. One is, there is a big, like, I guess, farming effect because we do use some of the excrement of the cows to, like, and some of the animals as manure. So, and we're going to start running out of good soil to use. We can use some of that, I guess, the excrement to, I guess, farm. And also, from a nutrients point, I think that the biggest problem is that if someone's trying to, I guess, it's not unhealthy to eat meat. I think 100% it's not unhealthy to eat meat. It's all about, I guess,
balance.
Limiting it. You just can't. It's all about limiting.
Let's not get into nutrition because me and her just went back and forth on that for like 20 minutes. So.
Okay, but I'll get back to my point. Like, we do need the animals. Because, is it considered bad to, like, take the animals, I guess, shit to, like, farm? I mean, you're taking something.
You can take their shit without killing them.
Yeah, but, like...
And you don't or as fertilizer. There are other alternatives for fertilizer. And the reason why we don't have that much fertile land left is because the vast majority of it is taken up to, like, grow feed for livestock. Like 26% of the world's, like, ice-free land is taken up by grazing animals alone. Grazing, like, free-range, grass-fed animals, they make up the tiniest minority of farming.
This is exactly correct.
I just find that, like, I was reading something about, manure from live animals is the best form of fertilizer. It is probably the most effective, and I think, like, there are other options, but veganism, I think the biggest problem is it's the least efficient. And when you get into things like, how will this affect the economy? How will this affect, like, people? Like, there's a lot of things on the line if you want to legally change this. Like, do you want to legally change it, or do you want to...
Meat and dairy industries are massive, massive financial sinks for the US government and for governments around the world. Like, Ireland is exactly the same. Like, milk is way overproduced, dairy, and so the government actually has an agreement with the dairy industry to buy that dairy off of them. That's why you had adverts for Got Milk.
Yes, the meat industry is heavily subsidized. That's what you're trying to say.
So do you want to limit it, or do you want to, I guess, make it, like, I guess, illegal, I guess? Or do you want a world where we don't eat meat in general? That's just a taboo thing.
Like, the legal change that I would like to see happen would for animals to be considered moral persons, not property.
But why?
Personhood, like, there are lots of examples why humans generally view animals as persons generally. Use personal pronouns to refer to them: he, her, him, she. In general, how we treat our pets and the animals that are close to them, we treat them as moral persons. We don't treat them as things.
But does livestock... Oh, you go. But does livestock have the, like, I guess, the mental capacity to decide what it wants or what it doesn't want? I don't think it does, because...
All of the animals,
Absolutely.
So do they have actual, like, mentality?
They have the capacity to know that they don't want to die.
Yeah, that's just instinct at that point. But, like, to go over themselves go over the moral status of it, they really don't.
No, they don't have moral concept. So weird. Well, were you watching the stream, Shagger? Because we kind of went over
a little bit. I just want to talk about the nutrients part, but I also did kind of want to talk about, I guess, the effect on the world. Because, like I said, economically, you're going to screw over a bunch of people because they're not going to have, like, you're going to try to limit meat eating, which means there's going to be a limit on jobs, which you're going to cut out a lot of jobs, and you're going to... This is a big thing that would happen. It would be like a big change on the world.
Is that true? Would there be less jobs?
There's still going to be farmers. There's going to be more, like, people growing crops and, like, transitioning to different industries.
Transitioning
and also,
it doesn't happen like that.
It's a transition. It's not a loss. You're going to lose jobs. You're going to gain jobs.
Are we going to gain jobs? You're cutting out a whole industry.
Let Lauren talk, and then one at a time.
There are ethical implications to this choice. So, for example, slave owners, when slavery was abolished, lost their jobs, lost their source of income. But we don't lament that those people lost their jobs. For the same reason, if some people lose out and they don't transition, they don't find a way to sort of keep up with this insanely changing market we're in, then that ultimately falls back on them. They're in an inherently cruel, inherently abusive industry in the first place. Like morally and economically, it's their responsibility.
But in a way, should you punish them for being in an industry that supports a lot of people, though? It's an industry that supports tons of people. And yeah, you'll be cutting out a lot of people, but to morally hurt them or to morally kind of like look down upon them because they got into an industry that, yes, is successful and somewhat necessary, they shouldn't be punished for that. They should at least be rewarded for doing it. I mean, it's a big risk. Like, starting business is a big risk. Just to punish them for it.
Not being punished, and they can be incentivized. Like, there could be grants given out for farmers to transition to growing hemp, for example, which can be used in making clothes or for food or lots of different purposes, and it's incredibly easy to grow. There are plenty of other industries that would be suitable for animal farmers to transition to, and ideally what I would like to see would be an incentive for those people to move to those industries. So I don't believe in punishing them, but in making a moral judgment, you have to judge people. And their industry, the jobs that they participate in, are inherently cruel.
I think the problem with it is that you're asking them to change a lot of things. They might not be in the situation where they can go to a farming situation. They can only stick to the meat industry, and they're trying their best. I actually do know 2 farmers who make an effort to be, I guess, what's the term? I guess, kind of humane to the animals. And there's just a point in time where, let's getting into nutrients, people just do need meat. Some people, that's a part of their diets. It helps them. Some people have jobs where they do need more meats and it's sad to say, but tofu and soy sometimes doesn't feel like it's enough. It's not enough lean meat. You need lean meats to do some jobs, and you just can't.
So, okay, hold on. Let's, before we get into that, because we already covered that, but I do want to say to one point that I think there's a little bit of, this doesn't just apply. So we live in a world that's rapidly changing, in fact, and like I said, as a consequence of that, we're probably, the way I see it is probably meat industry is going to go away at some point, whether it's due to lab-created meat or they're going to just have soy products everywhere or something, which I think are disgusting, and also really gross and really unhealthy for you. But anyways, that aside, the point that I'm trying to say is sometimes people have this argument, not that Lauren and Snaz are necessarily saying this, but it's kind of like the learn to code argument of well, we're going to lose a ton of jobs, but they can just adapt to something else. No, that's not how people work. That's not how anything works. You don't just lose an industry and then people adapt who've been doing that for 20 years into a completely new industry. People unfortunately aren't always permanently young and flexible in what they can do and not do. So with automation and with the changing world we live in, you are going to see a loss of jobs. We've already seen this. And this is going to have a lot of people without jobs, a lot of people without purpose. But it's not necessarily the fault of veganism or any of this. It's a much bigger macro problem of industrialization and automation that is going to take away jobs and purpose and meaning from people. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you guys disagree or agree.
I think you're absolutely correct on that, actually. But the question, it's, if the jobs themselves, and it's not the jobs themselves that are morally wrong, they are just trying to make a living, but if that entire industry, since the discussion is on the ethics of it, if that industry is unethical, then we shouldn't really be too concerned about the temporary loss of jobs there.
But isn't that, speaking of wrong industries, the hemp industry is, if you really go deep into that, it's a pretty morally, not I'm talking not unlawful, people getting arrested. I'm talking there are people who make hemp, and it's this. It's at that point it becomes crime because people are killing each other to get this industry going. It kind of goes to all industries. What defines as other morals?
I think killing people is wrong too.
And but there's other industries with that same issue And I find that
Absolutely.
you have the weapons industry. It's like, are we going to stop people from making weapons to protect themselves? We shouldn't, because yes, there needs to be some limit.
Right, but they're not killing the animals in self-defense.
I can agree with that, but the problem is that you're saying that, okay, we need to stop an industry because it's based on poor morals. You can say that for a lot of industries.
Industry is moral.
There is morals there, because you're making a weapon that can kill another person, and that's where it becomes the same situation. Someone doesn't have the will to know they can die, in a way. What I'm saying is that there are industries that you could close down that are to the equivalent of, I guess, the meat industry, and they're worse morally.
Weapons on people, then I'd say that was immoral. But I don't think that the weapons industry itself is immoral. No,
it can be immoral. I'm not saying I'm get rid of weapons. I'm saying that
there are other industries that are immoral, and we should take issue with that as well. Absolutely.
I just find that the meat industry, I feel like it's not as bad as people think it is. Yes, there are animals that are, there's some cruel places. I can agree with that. But there are places that are where I'm like, okay, they're trying their best to provide a service to the people who need it. There are people who eat meat. There are people who somewhat kind of rely on it, because and like I said, it's all about moderation. There are people.
My family owned a ranch. My grandfather for a long time. He had a whole ass ranch. So I know about farmers, and there are good farmers out there, but that doesn't mean that the entire industry is itself moral.
But do you condemn do you condemn a whole group of people just by a bad couple of eggs?
I condemn factory farms.
I would agree with that too.
I might agree with. I think I agree with Snaz, but I don't see I also agree that weapons manufacture. If you're going to apply that to farms, how can you not apply that to weapons manufacturers, which are ultimately killing people?
That's killing people, but it's also saving people.
Yeah, but the net result is more people dead from weapons than if we didn't have weapons, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Actually, I think so.
Yeah, but yeah. Actually, I'm not even sure.
Because then again, here's the thing: you could make the argument.
Actually, no, we'd absolutely find a way to kill each other, even if we didn't have a weapons industry. I don't think the weapons industry is immoral. Yes, it is taking lives, but it is also saving lives. If they were, killing people in testing their weapons, then I'd say, yeah, that's immoral. You can't just kill innocent people to test your weapons. But testing weapons, I own weapons. I don't think it's immoral for me to own weapons, and I think the weapons companies that made these weapons to allow me to protect myself.
But what about how they send these weapons to countries that are like somewhat morally unjust? Like some of these people get weapons to like terrorist organizations. There's where the moral ground becomes kind of
iffy. That's the problem.
Guys,
I agree.
I want to wrap this up. Lauren,
but that has nothing to do with meat.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to wrap this up because honestly, all this talk about food is making me hungry. I'm going to try to eat vegan today. I think I will. I'm going to go to the store, get some vegan options. Lauren, I'm going to give you the floor to give your sort of closing thoughts or like statement or whatever you want to say. And then I'm going to wrap it up on my stream. So you have the floor.
Thank you for the stream, Glink. Appreciate you, big guy.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you guys too.
Yeah.
If any of you watching do anything after you see the stream, I highly recommend checking out Dominion or Earthlings. They're both full-length films available on YouTube. And they just show exactly what happens in the slaughter process for various animals and different processes throughout their life. I think if you eat meat, you should face the victims of your choices. If you guys take anything away from that, please watch horrible, gruesome slaughterhouse footage and think about your consumer choices.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Do you have a social media or you want to plug or nothing? All right. Well, thank you for coming on. And the way this happened is Lauren messaged me, reached out to me, wanted to talk about this. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Because I never even had this discussion. So I think I understand a little bit more where I stand. And I think, again, like I pretty much agree with a lot of your philosophical stances. It's just a matter of almost priorities for me. and all that, but I do try to be conscious of these things, and I'll try to be more conscious of them and all that. So thank you guys for joining. It's been great.
Yeah, good. Thanks for the discussion. It was a nice one. Hope you guys have a really nice night.
Peace.